Just visible now in the strengthening light, a black gash as straight as a Roman road showed the course of the pipeline being driven through this remote valley. Directly in its path, just over the hill from where they now stood, a huddle of buildings lay surrounded by a patchwork of fields. As soon as the man reached him, Laszlo turned. The wind whipped up a shower of pine needles as the two of them moved through the edge of the forest. As they neared the crest of the hill, they flattened themselves to the earth and wormed their way to a point from which they could study the approach to Bourgemy. On the slope below, the trees gave way to fields of yellowing grass, dusted with frost and punctuated by mounds of autumn hay secured beneath tarpaulins. Beyond them, houses were clustered around a dusty square. A rusting iron water pump and a long stone horse trough stood at its centre, half shaded by a large stag-headed oak tree. The buildings at the heart of the village were of wood and stone, with sun-faded shutters and roofs of patched tiles or corrugated iron, steeply pitched to shed the winter snows. The gables of some had once been richly carved, but were now so weathered, cracked and split with age that the embellishments were barely visible. While those houses looked almost as ancient as the oak tree they faced, the buildings around them were drab Soviet-era constructions, their crumbling concrete facades pockmarked by bullet holes. A huge barn, built of unmilled wood with gaps between the planks, boasted a roof of heavily patched corrugated iron sheets. The whole place was mired in mud and poverty. Tangles of scrap metal and rotting timbers decorated the yards. A solitary motor vehicle, a battered larder with rust-streaked bodywork, was parked next to a pair of horse-drawn farm carts. Apart from a handful of chickens scuttling about and a few cows mooching in the fields, the place seemed to be deserted. At the side of the road just outside the village, an old door had been nailed to two fence posts driven into the ground. Daubed on it, in crude hand lettering, was an inscription in Russian, Georgian, and Ossetic: "Protect our village." The two men worked their way back from the brow and conferred in low tones. Although his companion was now issuing orders to him, Laszlo's stance and attitude showed that he did not regard him as his superior in any way. "Ready?" The man's Russian was halting but understandable, and now his accent gave him away. Laszlo nodded. "Ready, Englishman." He signalled to his men and led them down the hill, moving tactically, one foot always on the ground. Half the team stayed where they were to cover the advance of the rest. Using the haystacks to mask their approach, they too went static and returned the favour. A cock crowed inside a barn, and wisps of grey smoke began to rise from a chimney as some unseen inhabitant coaxed his fire into life. Laszlo was wary. It wasn't always like this. An attack could be initiated at any moment. He'd taken incoming from sleepy backwaters like this and lost men. That was why he favoured a rolling start line. If his team took fire as they approached, they'd just roll into the attack and fight their way forward. They reached the shadows of a tumble-down wall on the edge of the settlement and waited there, all eyes focused on the Englishman, as he took one last look at the target to confirm that nothing had changed since he issued his last set of orders the day before. He'd led them into a field for a run-through in slow time, letting the whole team see what each of the component groups would be doing during the attack. They'd rehearsed the what-ifs. What if the team had a man down? What if a group got separated from the main force? What if the team took heavy fire from an RPG? Now that the Englishman had seen in real time what he'd told them to call the battle space, he knew there was nothing to add. His voice was calm as he spoke to Laszlo. The South Ossetian checked that his men were in place and ready, raised his hand, paused a moment, and let it fall. The team burst from cover. With the Englishman leading one group and Laszlo the other, they advanced along both sides of the main street. Dogs set up a chorus of barks and howls, and a few villagers began stumbling from their houses, some clutching hunting rifles and shotguns, one or two with AKs, but the attacking force, better armed and better trained, cut them down before they fired a single round. Laszlo led his men from house to house. The crump of HE grenades and the crash of splintering wood were interspersed with cries and screams. Half-dressed and rubbing sleep from their eyes, the remaining occupants were dragged from their homes, herded into the open, kicked and punched face down into the mud, then immobilized with plastic zip ties.